I think it's become increasingly obvious that WikiLeaks is absolutely an operation. I don't think there is any doubt about this. We have a CNET article in which John Young, who is one of the original founders of WikiLeaks, spoke about how other individuals that were tied in with WikiLeaks were seeking funding for the operation. Now, first of all, a website that hosts documents, this is not a very expensive undertaking. It's very easy to host documents because they're not really that big data-wise. I mean, you can store a lot of PDF files on a server with a very low amount of cost these days. So it was curious as to why they needed millions upon millions of dollars for their operation. Because, again, it doesn't cost a whole lot of money to store documents and to set up a website for people to access them. You'll just have to pay for bandwidth. And bandwidth and storage is becoming cheaper and cheaper by the day. You can get terabytes worth of storage for a very low dollar amount these days. So this John Young, who is also the person behind Cryptome.org, which is another leaks website that hosts all these leaked documents, but he was originally involved with WikiLeaks, and he talked about how the Open Society Institute was one of the people, or not people, but one of the groups, one of the organizations that was involved in them trying to get financing from. And, of course, the Open Society Institute is a George Soros front group. And George Soros, of course, is the Zionist that is very wealthy and behind a lot of these so-called left-wing initiatives. But really, the guy is a high-level operative within the world order system. This guy made his fortune off of the UK's currency crisis back in the early 1990s. A very wealthy billionaire, and he has funded a lot of political causes ever since. Very powerful figure, of course, a member, or at least a one-time member of the Council on Foreign Relations. So I think we know where this guy stands. And he's very much in line with the whole Zionist agenda. So there's a great deal of people who believe that WikiLeaks is actually being funded and financed by George Soros. But beyond all of that, even if you don't believe that, let's just look at what they have done. And let's look at some of the comments from Julian Assange, who is, of course, the main figurehead that's promoted in the corporate media as being the guy behind WikiLeaks. Let's just look at that guy. This guy has come out and said that, well, 9/11 truthers irritate him because that's not a real conspiracy. And he's focused in on these so-called real conspiracies. Oh, is that right? So 9/11, those attacks, there's no conspiracy there. And we know that is a complete and total lie. Anybody who studies the 9/11 attacks, just for a few minutes, or just take a half an hour of your time, study the 9/11 attacks, and you'll see that the attacks are not at all how the 9/11 Commission presented them. All right, this isn't even debated. This is fact. We have commissioners on the 9/11 Commission who even admit this, that they believe that the commission was set up to fail. Yet Julian Assange, who, this is what the guy does. This is his job, right? This is all he does. You're telling me that he doesn't have any questions about the 9/11 attacks, when all these other conspiracies and all this other information that has come out really spawns from the 9/11 attacks. Let's see, the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, all of this spawns from the 9/11 attacks. And he doesn't think that there's a problem with the official story. Even though there's all these other conspiracies going on with government and all these other bad things happening, he thinks the 9/11 story is exactly as the government is telling us the attacks went down. That's insane. You're telling me that 3 buildings collapsed at free fall speed on one day when no such event has happened before or after that day. That these buildings, they just came down because of fire and burning jet fuel. And, of course, Building 7, that came down too because, there's some really hot fires on those few floors. And, that caused the building to collapse at free fall speed. Buildings do not collapse like that unless they're brought down with some sort of explosive force. And in the case of these three buildings, a highly coordinated explosive force could have only brought down these buildings. And that's just common sense. And he doesn't seem to have any problem with the war games or all these are suspicious things we could point to say, hey, there are many questions about the 9/11 attacks. So that right there raises questions about this guy's credibility to begin with. And then we see some of these so-called other leaks that came out, like we had leaks from the Iraq War that came out. And a lot of the information that they came out with didn't really reveal anything that we didn't already know. There were mainstream news reports that came out in overseas newspapers on the wire services that were essentially revealing the same information that the Wikileaks supposedly confirmed. And sure, you had that video that was released showing the killing of a bunch of people from a helicopter gunship. And yeah, we knew this was going on. There were widespread reports of war crimes and things like this happening. And I believe a lot of that stuff, when you look at it from an objective point of view, it seems as if a lot of this material was released intentionally to cover up what I would consider is things that is really just far, far worse. Things we probably can't even comprehend or imagine. And as awful as that video was, just imagine what else transpired. I'm sure it's horrific. But we already knew things like that were going on. And yeah, the video, it shows people getting killed and it shows war crimes. But again, we already knew about a lot of this stuff. So much of what they've leaked has been information we already knew about. And the corporate media just blew it up and made a big deal out of it. So now that we see this Cablegate leak of documents, or supposed leak, and we see how these documents are basically giving credibility to an invasion of Iran, it just seems very obvious to me that this is a staged operation. Again, let's review. There is a distinct possibility that Wikileaks is being funded and financed by George Soros, who is this Jewish Zionist that has links back to the Council on Foreign Relations. He's got that Open Society Institute, which, according to John Young, was involved with WikiLeaks at one time. The WikiLeaks people were trying to get funding and financing from the Open Society Institute. We have reports talking about how Israel is vindicated because of these WikiLeaks documents. Oh, they feel vindicated, do they? Well, that right there should tell you a great deal about why these documents were put out into the public domain. Julian Assange, lots of questions about him. Again, he has no questions about 9/11, but believes there are all these other conspiracies. Give me a break. WikiLeaks is a psychological warfare operation. That's all this is. And plus, it's a honeypot for anybody who leaks documents and thinks that WikiLeaks is credible. Because we're basically living in an information age in which information could travel faster than it ever has, at least in modern times. So as a result, if people think that this WikiLeaks site is credible and they decide to leak information, well, WikiLeaks might be able to get some information on the leaker. We find out who these leakers are. So it's a convenient honeypot to entrap anybody who wants to leak information from the inside. So I'm going to read my article. WikiLeaks Cablegate psychological operation justifies Zionist war propaganda. And hopefully this will give you some insight as to my thoughts as to why this whole thing is being played out and what the true purpose of this operation really is. And you can read this again up on roguegovernment.com. It's also linked to from blacklistednews.com if you'd like to take a look at it from there. This recent round of so-called leaked documents from WikiLeaks, now dubbed Cablegate, shows further confirmation that it is simply a tool being used in a massive psychological warfare operation against the people of the world. It is laughable that most of the stories coming out pertaining to these so-called classified documents support much of the Zionist propaganda we've seen put out over the past decade. These stories are simply providing further justification for a military invasion of Iran, which clearly supports the agenda of the bloodthirsty Zionist crusaders. It is even funnier to see the corporate media proclaim that thousands of these supposedly highly sensitive documents were leaked after they were simply burned onto a rewritable CD labeled Lady Gaga by a low-level member of the U.S. military. And yeah, that's the cover story for all of these documents being leaked. It's incredible. We have a story here from Gizmodo entitled, How a Burnt Lady Gaga CD Helped Leak Intelligence Files. I mean, I'm sorry. Okay, look. Yeah, is this a possibility? Sure. I mean, anything is a possibility. But you're telling me that security was this lax? You're telling me that the information technology people were that stupid? That they actually allowed people to be able to retrieve data in this fashion from these classified document repositories? This is insane. And you have this 22-year-old low-level soldier, Bradley Manning, who they are saying is responsible for a lot of this. Let me just read some from this article from Gizmodo. Exactly 251,287 pieces of data from 250 U.S. embassies and consulates was released yesterday by WikiLeaks. And while none of the information was particularly shocking, it is, or it has been described as the largest leak or largest intelligence leak in history. And here's how they say it happened. According to The Guardian, which was one of the chosen publications by WikiLeaks to help spread the information, the cables were copied from the Defense Department's SERPnet network by a 22-year-old soldier, Bradley Manning, who was working at an army base near Baghdad. Manning has been in solitary confinement since April after his unauthorized downloads were discovered. According to the soldier, it was all too easy to gain access to the network and download the files. I would come in with music on a CD-RW, a CD rewritable disc, label with something like Lady Gaga, erase the music, then write a compressed split file. No one suspected a thing. I listened and lip-synced to Lady Gaga's telephone while exfiltrating possibly the largest data spillage in American history. Amounting to 1.6 gigabytes of data, Manning claims that information should be free. It belongs in public domain. However, he made the mistake of instant messaging our hacker, Adrian Lamo, and boasting of his deeds. Lamo then dubbed him in while Manning uploaded all of the files to WikiLeaks. And so that's how they claim these documents were exfiltrated or released. Sure, could have this happened? It's a very slim possibility. I'm just not buying it. I just don't understand how they could be so stupid to allow this to happen in the first place. Very, very strange. And of all CDs, a Lady Gaga CD. I was just humming telephone. The whole story sounds contrived. It sounds like some sort of script. It doesn't even sound real. But whatever. I mean, believe what you want. You can either believe it or not believe it. I'm just saying that the story is incredibly suspect.